Well, this is becoming a little too common as Penn State misses on another one of its priority wide receiver recruits for the class of 2025. And at some point, Penn State's got to change what it's doing, or they're going to continue to get left behind.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's 3 recruiting losses in a row at wide receiver. Taz Williams chooses Baylor over Penn State. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Be a part of the discussion down in the comments section, what you think recently about Penn State football recruiting. It's probably not good, but I want to know your thoughts down in the comments. I tried to bring up the warning that this was a possibility, even though I was confident that Taz Williams and somebody else would end up in the wide receiver room, but now they've lost Lex Cyrus. Before that, Matthew Alton, and now Taz Williams. So we're going to discuss all of it, the impact of Taz Williams choosing Baylor, who's at fault, who needs to bear responsibility here, and what the outlook is for the class of 2025. To start with Taz Williams, I've said this, I'll reiterate it again. Taz Williams was my favorite wide receiver prospect personally. Okay, overall in the class of 2025, let me preface. I think that there are better wide receivers, or for example, Quincy Porter. Some people might be familiar with that name, took an early official visit. He is committed to Ohio State. But of the ones that are available for a realistic commitment to Penn State, where the Nittany Lions had a legitimate shot, this one stings purely from a talent and ability standpoint. I don't really care about Baylor. I don't care that Baylor was his ultimate choice. It's not like it was Michigan or Ohio State, even though that's the way that some recruitments have gone here this cycle. But Baylor, that's not the point. What is the point is that Taz Williams had a lot of upside. Versatile, all-around good receiver. I feel like he could have played any of the 3 wide receiver positions, the X, the slot, the Z, any of them. Stellar route running. I made the comparison to Jahan Dotson, and Penn State was in the lead. That's why this matters. Penn State was in the lead. We had good intel 24 hours before that suggested, hey, Penn State's still in really good standing. This should be a Nittany Lions commitment to kind of offset some of the other losses. They were in the lead, and then Baylor swooped in last minute and ended up taking the commitment. So that's what happened. Taz Williams is committed to Baylor, and Penn State misses again. Who bears responsibility? Why did this happen? Because that's what everyone cares about here. Okay, you can change the player, change the prospect that was in the lead, that Penn State was in the lead for in recruiting, and they end up losing them to another school. I feel like some listeners and viewers are split on this. Some people feel like I'm too critical. Others probably believe that I've sugarcoated this, and maybe I have. The truth is the truth, for what it's worth. Some of these recruitments are NIL related. Some of them are strictly NIL related. It comes down to dollars, and then that's it. That's the school that the prospect is picking. That is modern day college athletics recruiting. That's the case in basketball too. It's not just relevant to Penn State football. But there are some situations where Penn State is close, and they could have used NIL to push themselves over the finish line, and they didn't. And then there's other times where, it just wasn't the best recruiting job by the coaching staff. That's what we're starting to find out is that, yes, some of them are completely NIL related. Other parts of it, NIL could have helped. But that doesn't matter at the end of the day. Nobody cares what the actual reason is. Nobody cares what that reason is. Whether it's some NIL, all of it's NIL. It's about results. And Penn State hasn't gotten the results when it's come to wide receivers and some of the other overall prospects that were high up on their big board. Business is business. The market is the market. Business is business. The market is the market. If it costs X amount of dollars to get said player, then be prepared when that program is willing to pay. And you're not. If Penn State isn't willing to be competitive and do what is necessary in the modern day of recruiting, then they're going to continue to get bullied like this by whatever program. It's not just Ohio State. It's not just Michigan. They're not getting attacked in recruiting by the Big Ten Conference. Well, I guess Oregon in this case, but Baylor, Auburn, South Carolina, Missouri, all these different schools. That's going to continue unless Penn State makes some change. We know what that change is. If that's more of an aggressive NIL approach, that's what it's going to take. Each recruiting loss has followed this timeline, it feels like. The big ones anyway. Quincy Porter, I guess a little bit of a different story just to give you an example here. But Taz Williams or Matt Zollers or Zahir Mathis or Michael Carroll or Matthew Alton, Penn State is in the lead. I think Brandon Finney is another one, right? Committed to Oregon last second. Where Penn State is in the lead, and it looks really good, but hang on, pump the brakes, red flag. Random school comes in, and Penn State ends up losing the commitment. So the recent iteration of this is Taz Williams. Penn State has to change something. But they've been good in other parts of the recruiting class. Like the recruiting class is still really solid. They're top 10 according to Rivals. According to 24/7 on 3, they're in the top 20. But this is a solid class, but it's not where Penn State would have wanted it to be, and it's disappointing to see them lose on priority recruits that they really felt strongly about that they could have secured a commitment from, especially the ones where they were leading. Somebody does bear responsibility here. You can point the finger at NIL so much. Marques Hagans is the wide receivers coach. How much responsibility does he bear? We'll discuss that on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into that MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I like Marques Hagans as the wide receivers coach. I think he is an overall really good coach, and I've been understanding of the situation that he's been brought into. He inherited a pretty rough setup. Taylor Stubblefield didn't exactly leave things in the greatest of shape, and Hagans arrived late in the cycle last year. But now he's settled in. He doesn't need more time. You know, what's the excuse here that, oh, it's a timing issue. It's still only really his first full go around. He's been in college football for a long time. It's not like he's a true rookie. He's been coaching wide receivers at the University of Virginia. He is here now at Penn State, though. He's settled in. He has the resources that he didn't necessarily have at Virginia. So we say that, well, Penn State's not as competitive with its NIL, but I got to imagine that Penn State's NIL situation is better than what Virginia is offering. So he has the brand, he has the resources, he has more NIL than some, but maybe not as to the likes of an Oregon or a Texas A&M, right? It's all kind of relative here. But you look at the list of wide receivers that Penn State is missing on, and it's starting to get a little extensive. I've mentioned Quincy Porter. That one was a long shot, but it's still a miss. He was your top player on your big board. He chose Ohio State. Taz Williams now. You were leading for Taz Williams, and he ends up choosing Baylor. Lex Cyrus, Matthew Alton. And Penn State really isn't in good standing with anybody else here at this point in time. Okay, sure, there's Kobe Howard. People are starting to become more familiar with Kobe Howard, a 4-star out of the state of Florida. Rivals has him in the top 150. That would be a good prospect to get, but Penn State clearly had other ones prioritized that they missed. In the case of Lex Cyrus, there really is no excuse for that. There really isn't. Maybe South Carolina offered a little bit of more NIL, but you listen to the quotes, you listen to his interviews and what he said about what ultimately made him choose South Carolina, or why he felt strongly about South Carolina as opposed to Penn State, and he credits the wide receivers coach for the Gamecocks. Guys like Cyrus should be committed. This falls on someone. I would imagine that's the wide receivers coach, Marques Hagans. He bears some amount of responsibility for that. Some of it, because I know that these situations are NIL related. That's got to be on the extracurricular things for Penn State in that department. That's not to blame specifically a Pat Kraft or anything. There is a department, there is an NIL director, but there is an initiative. Happy Valley United has to figure some things out. So there's responsibility there. But when you're the wide receivers coach, and you've been doing this for quite some time, albeit at a different program, you're going to bear some responsibility here. Lyric Samuel and Jeff Exner are solid prospects. Great additions. I like them a lot. I think they complement what Penn State wants to do well moving forward, but that's still far into the future, right? This is the class of 2025 we're talking about, everybody. Samuel and Exner, by the time they make a true impact, might not be till 2027. Okay? That's a long ways away. We're gearing up for the 2024 season. So that's 3 years out when they make a true impact. In a class where you needed at least 4, maybe 5 wide receivers. I've said in my opinion that this should have been a 5 wide receiver class. It seems like Penn State's goal was to get 4 quality wide receivers, and you only get 2 of your primary guys. You only get 2. Now, never say never. Flip season is approaching, but if you can't recruit with your words, this is how things can get better. If you can't recruit verbally here in this situation, it now becomes based on your actions. Brian Smith has said this. Locked On's recruiting expert has been here. There isn't a lot of tangible evidence to back up that, hey, if I go to Penn State and I'm a wide receiver, that I'm going to take that next step and get to the NFL. So forget NIL and everything else in the modern day of college football recruiting. The passing game was atrocious in 2023. It was okay in 2022. 2021, Penn State went 7-6 on the offense. It wasn't phenomenal. We saw what 2020 was. And then there's been this rotation of wide receivers coaches. Gerard Parker, Taylor Stubblefield, now Marques Hagans. There's no consistency. There hasn't really been consistency since Parker, if I'm being honest. So that was a long time ago. And then you've seen talented players come in, a Justin Shorter, not pan out. Those recruits aren't thinking about that specifically, but all those examples add up here. All of those things eventually do add up. So if you can't recruit now, prove everybody wrong. Show the prospects in season that you can develop. How do you do that? You reestablish Julian Fleming. Julian Fleming was a former 5-star, one of the top wide receivers in his respective recruiting class. Reestablish him. I'm not saying that he needs to be a 5-star and live up to over 1,000 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns. He can have a quality season and be better than what he was at Ohio State, and that can be a good start. Get Caden Saunders to live up to that 97 rating according to 24/7 Sports. Get him to live up to that high where he was a near 5-star. He was so close to being a 5-star. Get him to live up to that status. Make Liam Clifford look like he was undervalued, overlooked when he was recruited and ranked out of high school. That is the only way at this point. Make those prospects second guess themselves. I will finish with this to kind of tie my argument all together here and my reasoning. Marques Hagans is struggling. It's NIL related. Maybe it is. Maybe it could be better. Okay, let's say that. Penn State's NIL could be better. But is Deion Barnes struggling with that? Is Terry Smith struggling with that? Anthony Poindexter? Because when I look at this class of 2025, Deion Barnes has gotten every single prospect that he has wanted except Zahir Mathis, and that's a work in progress. That one's not over. Terry Smith is running victory laps. And yes, you want to hold yourself, in-house competition, hold yourself, right? Hold others accountable, set the standard here. But Terry Smith in general, when it comes to college Big Ten recruiting, he's running victory laps because he has gotten nearly everybody. And if not, he recovered. There's no recovery right now for the wide receiver position. I'm saying that can change if you can prove that Marques Hagans, you are a good developmental coach. That's where you have to do this now because the verbal recruiting isn't working to this point. NIL could be better, but it's not the end all, is what we're figuring out. So Smith, Poindexter, Barnes aren't having those issues. Why is Hagans? We'll finish up the show on the other side of this break. Just in general on the class of 2025, what the outlook is moving forward. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sportsing aren't exactly sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app, and I can dream up some bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all of its customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every single day all summer long. So all you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. You can bet on everything from Major League Baseball to Wimbledon tennis to the WNBA. You can even bet on Penn State's first game early. Penn State's currently a 10.5-point favorite against the West Virginia Mountaineers, minus 390 on the money line with the total set at 49.5. If you like those lines, all you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And we'll briefly wrap this episode up as we look at the class of 2025. And overall, it is solid. It is a really good class. They address some needs, not wide receiver necessarily, and it's not over. National Signing Day isn't until December. There's still time, but it gets a little more difficult. It becomes a steeper battle uphill when you miss now 3 times in a row, as I've mentioned. You have really good defensive commits. You have really good defensive commits, very talented defensive commits. You have 3 running backs. I think the offensive line is a little lacking. They only have 2 tackles and then a tight end that's projected to be a tackle. I think the offensive line could be better. You have 1 quarterback and 1 quarterback that will need some development, but then that's kind of offset with the promise of what 2026 holds with Troy Hume. So you kind of hedge your recruiting bets here in a sense. You're set at 2026, 2025. You can allow Beckham Kritza do what he needs to do to become the player he needs to be. But there are no top tier offensive linemen. You only have 2 wide receivers in this class of 2025. You have 1 underrated tight end. You have the tight end that is going to convert to offensive tackle most likely. The defense is carrying the offense in this class. And stop me if you've heard that one before. It feels like a deja vu all over again because it is. The defense is carrying the offense. That has been the case for the past few seasons. 2021, even forget record for a second. 2021's defense was better than the offense. 2022's defense was better than the offense. 2023's defense was much better than the offense. And 2024's defense, I would say as I sit here right now, I feel more strongly about the 24 offense or the 2024 defense, pardon me, than I do the 2024 offense. Even though I think the offense will improve, I think it will be better, I would place my bets that the 2024 defense will have it figured out before the offense does. But now that continues. That's still going on, which is fine. That's allowed, but not when you're not producing the results that are necessary on offense. Defense wins championships. Okay, but you need somewhat of an offense to at least help you out there. I get the saying. I agree with the saying. I'd rather have Penn State have a top 5 defense than a top 5 offense. That's my opinion. Feel free to debate me in the comments section. But you still need a semblance of an offense that can do what it needs to do, sustain drives, play ball control, if that's the route you're going to go. Because look, it worked for Michigan. Michigan just won a national title. They had a top 3 defense, number 1 in some metrics, because Penn State owned some of those metrics as well. They were number 1 in categories, so was Michigan. But Michigan had an offense that could ground and pound, control the pace of the game, dictate the entirety of the contest, and that's what Penn State's trying to mimic. But once again, the defense is carrying the bulk for the offense. And that's the case here again in the class of 2025. So things aren't going to change until this current group is able to work it out. But right now, the class of 2025, even though those players won't impact until 26, 27, 28 down the road, it's still looking oddly familiar. I like the class of 2025. I do. But look at that. 3 running backs and a really good defense. That's pretty much the current setup right now as well, isn't it? Penn State has an impressive ground game, but they need more help offensively. They can't rely on the defense to bail them out forever. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate you checking out this episode. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like on it. Share it with friends and family. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you're not already, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast to stay up to date for all the recent news around Penn State football, Penn State wrestling, all of your favorite Penn State teams. And we'll have more content on the way. Interviews, some wrestling chatter, all coming up next week here on Locked On, in addition to football, right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.